Expressing your love can look many different ways. And with the right jewelry gift from Blue Nile, it can truly sparkle. Blue Nile's collection of classic diamond jewelry makes for the kind of gift that speaks volumes without saying a single word. Or switch things up with a sapphire piece sure to spark conversation. Either way, Blue Nile's Diamond Guarantee ensures you get the highest quality at the best price. Express yourself with Blue Nile, the original online jeweler, at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
Harper hits one in the air, left back, it goes! Harper, the swing of his life!
MLB playoffs are near, and you know what that means, Alex?
Yep, Flippin' Bats will be staying up late and having all the fun.
From breaking down the most important stories in games, nobody's done what he's doing. Nobody, not even Babe Ruth.
To interviewing baseball's biggest stars.
I felt like I was pitching more stress. I was trying to be so perfect.
No one covers America's pastime like us.
So as we sprint towards this year's World Series on Fox, please make sure to listen, follow, and subscribe to Flippin' Bats with Ben Verlander and me, Alex Curry.
Baseball is fun, and so are we. We're going to have fun, dang it! We'll talk to you soon.
I've been in dogs since 1991. We breed dogs that we want to train. I was out here in western Nebraska riding Harleys and training dogs. I don't sugarcoat anything, and if you don't like it, tough.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for episode number 3. And man, we have an amazing episode for you tonight. We've got our very first guest that's going to be coming on, joining us in just a little bit, Chris Akin, and the Chris's, they call him, Chris Jobman, Chris Akin. They are going to go through everything about the Grand. But before we do that, I've got Chris Jobman here, and he's going to just give us a little update about what's been going on at Flatlander Kennels for the past couple of weeks. All right, go ahead, Chris.
Hey, everybody. Hey, thanks for joining us again for episode 3. Our first one was very well received. We got a lot of good info on it, and we're pretty proud of it. Hopefully this thing takes off and does well. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about where we are at with the kennel, what's going on with the kennel. Everybody's very, they like to know what's going on. And right now we're on our winter trip. And what we do here during our winter trip is we take like the season level dogs and above, and we leave Nebraska and we come to Texas. We're just northwest of Fort Worth, Texas, on staying up down here. And a friend of ours has a lot of properties we can train on. So what we do is Ryan and I took off. We've got 40 dogs with us. And what we're doing is we're just basically training every day, sun up to sundown, haven't had a day off in 2 weeks. And we won't until we get home. Then we got, like I said, 40 dogs with us. It's quite the process. We, rent houses and hire help and put up airing yards and the whole 9 yards. So it's a big deal. And at home at the kennel are our younger dogs, and Andrew and Julie are taking care of the kennel, and they're training all the young dogs. The dogs are just starting to mark and starting to teach to handle, and those dogs there. And so they're up there by themselves, and they're doing all of that. And while we're down here, we like to run a few tests here and there. And basically what we're doing is getting ready. We run a lot of the young dogs to try to get maybe a couple starter passes to get their 10 points. And then we run them in season 2, and then we can run them, and the young dogs and finished. But my main concern down here is getting my dogs ready for the Grand. And that starts April 22nd. So what we'll do is about April 15th, Ryan will head back up north to Nebraska, and I will head southeast to the Grand. Last weekend, we sent Ryan to our first hunt test of the year. We went to he went to Lonesome Dove HRC, which is about an hour west of us, and he ran a bunch of young dogs. He ran 12 dogs on Saturday. He ran 11 dogs on Sunday, and of those basically 12 dogs he ran, 11 of those dogs, this was their very, very first hunt test. And we did run started, we ran season, we ran finished, and they did really well. He went 22 for 23 over the weekend. And, we used to not run started years ago. We just jumped into seasoned. But we like to run started with some of our dogs, get their 10 started points on them. That way we only need 3 season passes in a weekend to get their title for their season title, their HR title. That way, if they have a bobble or something one weekend, we can always enter them and run them again. If we do seasoned right away and they have a bobble, that's a whole nother weekend of seasoned. So we try to get their 10 starter points, get their 3 season passes, get their HR title, then we move into finished. But they all did really, really well. And right now we're gearing up and training. Our next test is the last weekend of March. And we are going to go to I can't even remember where we're going. We're going just north of Bonham, Texas. We're going up there. Oh, Lone Star. We're going to Lone Star HRC. And we can only run 8 dogs a piece there at that test. So I'm going to run all my grand crew, but I'm going to run them separate days. So some will run Saturday, some will run Sunday to do that. And to be honest with you, I'm taking 19 dogs to the grand, so they all won't get to run. They all won't get to run at that test. And then Ryan's going to run a bunch of he's going to run 4 seasoned dogs and 4 finished dogs, all young ones that don't have any titles. But then once that's over, then we'll just train a little bit more, and I'll head to the Grand to meet Chris and the crew, and Ryan will head north to meet Andrew and Julie, and we'll get started up there, and I'll be heading to the Grand. But I just want to give everybody an update on what's happening with FLK and what's going on. It's a very, very, very busy time of the year right now.
And let me ask you just a couple quick questions that people, I know I'm curious about. How many dogs can you fit into one trailer? Is that about 40 or max? Or do you have to run 2 trailers?
My trailer.
And is that what you guys call them? Do you guys call them trailers, or do you call them kennels?
Yeah, they're trailers. They're trailers. They're trailers. So my rig hauls 20 dogs in their trailer. It's a gooseneck. It hauls 20 dogs in there, and I can put 2 dogs in my dog box in the back of my truck. And then Ryan's rig it's an 18-hole gooseneck trailer, and he also has a 2-hole dog box in the back of his truck. So he can haul 20. I can haul 22. Right now we got 40 dogs with us. We have a few more coming still that are going to run the Grand. They're not quite here yet. They're on their way. We got to get going on. They're late arrivers due to some unforeseen circumstances with the owners and stuff. But we're going to get them down here, and we'll get cranking on them and get rolling. But each one of our trailers hauls 4-wheelers. Each one's got a 4-wheeler drive up. They got 4-wheelers. We got wingers. We're pretty self-contained on these things. It's a goat roping
right.
For sure.
Right. Cool. All right. And guys, if you have specific questions for Chris, join us on our Facebook group. It's the Flatlander Kennels Podcast with Chris Jobman on Facebook. There's already over 300 people that have joined after one episode. So join us over there, and that's the best way that you can ask questions, because we're going to do a lot of Q&A sessions. Actually, we're doing a Q&A session our next episode with both Chris's. So join us over there, and don't forget to give us a review and a rating if you like what we're doing. We're going to take a quick break here, and then we are going to have on Chris Akin, and both the Chris's are going to just give you everything you need to know, or as much as they can in this time, about the Grand. We will be back in just a moment. All right, we are back, and we are joined here with Chris Akin. So we got both the Chris's here, and I'm going to pass this on. Chris Jobman, go ahead and take it from here, and let's talk about the Grand.
Hi, everybody. I have one of my best friends in the whole wide world join us tonight, and his name's Chris Akin. He owns Web-Footed Kennels there in Jonesboro, Arkansas. And if you don't know who Chris Akin is in the dog training world, you've been living under a rock. This guy has been doing it longer and better than about any kennel I've ever been around or ever about in the entire country. So between him and I, we have 113 Grand Hunter Retriever champions, which he has the majority of those. But I want to introduce Chris Akin. Chris, tell us about yourself, where you're from, what you do. Give us a little insight on who you actually are.
Well, I live here in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and we run and operate Web-Footed Kennels, and we're right here in the middle of duck country. We've got all the duck rivers: Black, White, Cache, Langille, St. Francis. My house is right in the middle of every one of those, and just all in duck country. And so, growing up, I grew up here, just got into duck dogs, at a young age, and it just kind of took me over. And I've been training professionally since 1989. And I just, building meat dogs and gun dogs for people. And then it just slowly evolved into, us running a lot of hunt tests. And, we've titled about 800 hunt retriever champions through the kennel now. Between 300 and 400 master hunters. And I think it's 67 or 68 grand champions. And, we've got a bunch of qualified all age dogs. We've had, we ran the Super Retriever Series, won the Great Outdoor Games, won the Crown Championship. I mean, we just, the dogs just carried us a lot of places, and had a lot of great dogs through the years, and been blessed to be right here in the middle of duck country, and we're a lot of duck hunters, and they support us through the years and the way to make a living.
Well, and I'm gonna brag on you a little bit because you ain't gonna do it. But there's a debate out there who's got the most Grand Hunter Retriever champions in history, and I'm going to tell you guys right now, whoever's listening, there is no debate. Chris has got the most Grand Hunter Retriever champions in the history of HRC. I would almost put my house up for sale on this deal, but he is Web-Footed Kennels and their staff is probably the most recognizable, most successful retriever training facility in the history of dog training. I do not know another, and I've been around a little while, I don't know another kennel or trainer who has put out more hunt test titles, HRC and AKC and Grands, all combined than Web-Footed Kennels. The number is ridiculous. I have 50 Grand Hunter Retriever champions, and he's damn near 20 more than me. I do know between Chris and I, we have over 300 total Grand passes. A lot of those dogs, had multiple Grand passes or one that would never get finish up or whatever. But as far as knowledge of dogs, training style, and that sort of thing, there is not a kennel that is more successful than Web-Footed Kennels. There is no doubt in my mind. But so
well, let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you a little bit. Right there. You say that we've been doing this for a long time, and when we started training dogs, there wasn't the knowledge at your fingertips like there is today. So it was a very self-taught skill. There wasn't a whole lot of people around here, especially right here in my backyard at the time. When I first started training dogs, I was the third gun dog trainer in the state of Arkansas. At that time, there was one outfit down here 60 miles away, and they trained about 25 to 30 at a time, mainly gun dogs, a few hunt test dogs running UKC. There was another trainer south of me 100 miles, and he trained some duck dogs, and he was keeping 20 to 30 at a time, and that was it. And those two trainers, they didn't know a heck of a lot. They dang sure wasn't going to share it with me because I was infringing on their market at the time, and so we did all this by trial and error, and we've all learned from each other. Chris and I have been training together for a long time for the Grand. He lives in Nebraska and I live in Arkansas, but we get together for every Grand and every National, usually a week to 8-9 days before, and we pre-train, and we're constantly, battling this stuff out and what's the best way to do it. We're very blessed to have that knowledge for each other. And then, I've had a lot of good trainers that have worked for me in the past. Got the best ones I've ever had right now, that work for us and are part of the kennel. And it's just an amazing amount of knowledge. I mean, I don't know how many years we've got just amongst my staff, but it's probably, it's over 100 years, over 100 years of knowledge in professional dog training. Through three people.
Yeah, you and I have an unbelievable staff right now, both.
Yeah, and so we constantly calling each other and talking and visiting. But in today's world, the power of the internet and all these different apps, and Freddie's got a great system that he's got an app. There's all kind of dog training videos. I did a series on them several years ago, and Duck Dog Basics. And, all this stuff on YouTube and just all the knowledge that's out there today is just absolutely incredible. So we had to learn back in the day where it was trial and error, basically. And so, for us to have as many titles as we have just from some hillbillies trying to figure out how to train a dog, it's pretty amazing even when I think about it.
You and I learned identical. I mean, I've been doing it since 2000. This is my 23rd year, and you've been doing it a lot longer than that. But we learned the same way, and it's funny how the world puts people together, and they're like, okay, that's my human being. That's my friend, and how it all works. And this was hilarious. So I ran my first Grand in 2003. Didn't do very well for a couple of years, but I titled my first dog in 2006. But in 2000, this is a great story that people don't know about. In 2007, right? Well, actually, the very first Grand I ever ran, I met Chris, and he doesn't even know it yet. But I met him on they used to have training grounds that they gave us at the Grand, and he pulled up, and I was a little Dodge pickup with a little 4-wheel trailer, and I was there with one dog, and I said hi, and he said hi, and he drove off, and he don't even remember that. But in 2007, at the 4 States HRC Grand, there in Texarkana, I was training with my buddy Andy Fontenot, and we lost our grounds. And we had a mutual friend by the name of Tom Herman from Colorado. He lives in Texas now. That I called Tom, and he was training with Chris. He was training that Grits dog that I ended up getting a Grand title on. And he was training this Grits dog, and I called Tom. I said, hey, man, I lost our grounds. Do you think Chris would mind if we came over? He goes, well, let me ask him. And we didn't have very many dogs. Back then, we could only run 8 apiece, and I think I only had 5, and Andy he might have had 8. And Chris said, yeah, come on over. So we drive over there, and you got to understand something. When I'm first starting out in 2000, and it's now 2007, I'm still a little starstruck by Chris. That faded real quick. But back then, I was starstruck. And he's like, yeah, come on in. So we joined his training group. And that was 2007. And this has got to be a record. We have trained every year. This is coming this spring Grand. We have trained for every Grand, every Master National. And back then we ran the SRS, and we got going in the SRS. We ran the SRS before Lyle Steinman and Steven Durrance ran the SRS together. That's how long we've been running. We have trained for every SRS back in the day, every Grand, and every Master National. This is our 16th year, and we have trained for every national event together. That is something there, and that's probably the most proudest thing I'm part of. I mean, we're tight, and it's been a lot of fun. And doing that, but 16 years in a row.
And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do that, because nowadays with the unlimited entries with the national and the Grand, you got to understand, like we're running Web-Footed Kennels is running 16 dogs in the Grand. I think Flatlander's running 19. And so that training group right there, I mean, with that many dogs, 35 dogs, that's a training group right there in itself. And so it's a lot of work, because when you're on the road, it's hard to have a lot of manpower at your fingertips like we do at the kennel, where we've got hired throwers and experienced throwers and know how to do all that. Not to mention, when we're on the road, everything's displaced. We're having to take care of the dogs, not in airing yards, not in kennels. I mean, everything just takes them. So it is a major deal to train like that on the road in a training group that size.
It's made
Elliot here. I'm going to jump in and ask you guys a question real quick. When you guys train together, that I'm curious about, do you guys spend a lot of time talking about what you do, or do you learn from each other just by watching? How much time do you guys break down problems and how you each deal with it, and how does that affect your training?
You don't even want to hear our conversations. I'm telling you right now, man. We very seldom talk about dogs. It is the most mind-numbing thing you've ever heard. And if we have a problem dog, we talk about it or whatever. But usually, this is a true story. We had a friend of ours from Colorado that used to train with us. He was a doctor. He's probably the most brilliant person I've been around. I mean, he is brilliant. He was sitting there training with us. He ended up getting his Grand title on his dog, and good friend of ours. And he's sitting there, and we're talking. We're training dogs, and we're talking, right? And the conversation is just it's like 6-year-olds. This is a true story. He literally, now correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. He stood up.
I know exactly what you're fixing to say.
He stood
I know
up.
what you're fixing to say.
He stood up. He slammed his chair together. He goes, I am literally getting stupider listening to you MFers talk right now. I am leaving. He literally drove off and went to dinner. That is a true story. That is a true story. He's like, I'm literally getting stupider listening to you guys talk. And he drove
Well,
off.
you got to understand that in our world, it's 7 days a week talking about dogs, and 7 days a week talking about puppies and equipment and all the stuff that we got to do. And we will do some of that. We do talk about that, no doubt. And we do, but we train so similar. We train so similar, and the same things we do. There's not a whole lot that's changed in 6 months or 5 months as we trained together before. And so we don't have a whole lot to talk about that anymore because we've been doing it so long. But we do have a lot of other conversations where we're talking, both of us are huge waterfowlers, avid waterfowlers. And we love to talk about hunts and hunting and, family and friends hunting with us and all that. That's probably our biggest topic that we talk about all the time. And because we look forward to that, every year. And, I've been up there and Chris comes down here and we get to do that together too as well. But we really talk about other stuff more because we do train so much alike. There's not a whole lot to talk about now. I mean, there's always dogs that, hey, what would you do here? What would you do there? Kind of deal. But as a rule of thumb, we let each other handle things how we handle it. But we do train a lot alike. I mean, it's a lot of similarities and.
Yeah. It's funny that the first time I trained with him in 2007, we trained together. We train so much alike. Even the very first time that we just have the same, we see the same thing. We train a lot. We do a lot of the same things. And it's funny. We can train together for the Grand or the National or wherever we're training for. And we pull up to a spot. We see the exact same thing. Like it is crazy. It's been like that since day one. So a lot of times when we train for the Grand for ourselves in our group, we let somebody else set the setup up and we don't even get involved because we see the same thing. Like we need to do something different. What do Eric, what do you see? Or Rhett, what do you see? And then they'll set it up and we run it because we look at the same thing. We see the same thing. And it's been like that since day one. It's the craziest thing ever. But, let's move forward here because this is going to be a long episode. We just have a lot to talk about, and we talk a lot. So we're just going to move forward. Chris, what year was your first grand dog that you made, and what was her name?
I think it was in 90 or 91, and it was Willie Hunt, which is a golden retriever. Yeah. It's still a dog. We still have the same lines. Chris and I's both personal dogs that we both own. We own litter mates. Is out of that dog, matter of fact. And that was my first great dog that I had, and he was a 3-time grand champion, a master hunter, but he was way ahead of his time, and he was way better than me. Back then, grands were very complex, more complex than they are now as far as the logistics of running the test. And then at the same time, you got to realize there wasn't very many dogs back then. I think my first grand had 90 dogs in it, total, 90 dogs in it. And then to take that step even further, the order was different in which the grand was run, which made it more difficult because you ran a land series, a water series, and then you ran the upland, and then you ran another land and water series or water and land, however they wanted to do it, because we all ran the same series. And, you basically ran all the series in the same day with the entire grand crew. It's very different than what it is today.
How many days is it today? How many days you run now?
It's 5.
Believe it or not, it's running 5 days, but like there's 8 to 10 series run at one time, although there's going to be 900 to 1,000 dogs entered into the event now. The shameful part of the Grand today, for me, compared to what it used to be, is that when you do run a Grand like this, there's a possibility that Elliot, if you're running a dog in the Grand, you could run 2 lands and 2 waters. Chris and I, because we're always on the same flight, run 2 lands and 2 waters, completely different from what you even run. Now, and okay, so you may draw the 2 easy water blinds that absolutely hacks half the Grand. So, you miss out on those 2. Of course, Chris and I draw them, which is fine. We don't mind drawing the hard water blinds, but at the same time, you ran a different Grand than I ran. And that's an unfortunate deal. And then you can even take it a step further than that. If you run a different test on a different day, the wind's different, the lighting's different. It's raining that day. Mainly the wind and the lighting are the 2 big things. It could be completely different tests. Chris and I ran one time in South Carolina on a banded water test. And Chris, you helped me with my numbers, but there was 94 dogs, I believe, ran that test as our first series. 90 of the 94 handled on 1 mark. 90 of 94 handled on 1 mark because of the wind. The next day they ran 90 some odd in it. Yeah. 90, they ran 90 the second day, and they had 4 handle, and the other ones were all clean. And it was all because of the wind. And, it was crazy.
That test was banded water at Cheraw, South Carolina. And there is no arguing this, it's statistics. That was the hardest series at the Grand in history. So we had 4 dogs do that entire first day clean. 4. I had the first dog, I did it with Barley, a big chocolate male that I own. He was dog 37. He was the first one to do it clean. It was the wind and the conditions, and the test was hard, don't get me wrong, but the wind and the conditions was unbelievable. That was the hardest thing. That was unbelievable. But then it eased it up. So it eased up after that because the wind changed and the lighting changed. But I'm going to tell you, that first day, I've never seen anything like it. Let's talk about the Master National just for a second. The Master National is supposed to be 6 series of master tests, right? Ran like a master test. So if you have a really consistent, good master hunter, you can go to the Master National and do really well because there's supposed to be 6 series of master tests. The Grand is much, much, much different monster. The Grand is above and beyond what finished is. So if you have an HRCH and you have a dog that's passed an 8 or 9, finished tests in a row, and you're going to go to the Grand, you're thinking, hey, we're going to go to the Grand, we're going to get a Grand pass, you need to pump your brakes a little bit because the Grand is not 5 series of finish tests. It is now the Grand. It's above and beyond. It's higher. It's harder. It's more difficult. So let's talk about, Chris, the lady or the man that's got the great dog, 2-3-year-old dog. He's passed 10 finish tests in a row. He's going to the Grand. He's expecting to pass that. Give us your thoughts on. And your thoughts and my thoughts are identical on this. Give us your thoughts on that. What are they going to expect when you go to the Grand and you got a dog? What are you going to expect?
Well, so I think that what you're going to expect and what I'm going to talk about what to expect, and I'm going to talk about what the differences are from a weekend test versus the Grand. Number one, the test starts when you come out of the holding blind and you are under really tight control to the bucket. You're really tight control at the bucket, and you can't creep, you can't whine, you can't bark, you can't any of that. Weekend test, it's a lot looser getting to the bucket. It's a lot looser at the bucket than what you would normally see at a Grand. And then let's face it, once we get into the field, the marks aren't going to be completely different from a weekend test on 2 of the 3 marks.
Yeah.
I think that there's going to be usually 1 mark in each land series that's going to be a dandy. That's going to be, on a scale of a 10, it's going to be a 9, where all your weekend finish tests are going to be at 6s and, 5 and 6s and 7s. It's definitely going to be harder to see. The dog's got to be really attentive to following with the gun. The dog's got to be able to get to that mark. Understand that weekend finish test, 2 judges walk up there, they pick out 3 marks. Let's put 1 there. Let's put 1 there. Let's put 1 there. Put the blind there. Let's set it up. Let's go have some beverages. So they set it up and it's done. At the Grand, they show up and they run test dogs, setup dogs as they call it. And if these setup dogs go to where these marks are thrown, they scrap that deal. And they keep putting that test together. Okay, and so they set this up to the point that those setup dogs aren't doing that well. Okay, so they're understanding that all the dogs want to go to the left, they're going to throw it out to the right, and vice versa. And they run 8 or 9, 10 dogs, I've been told, during these setups, and figuring out what dogs, dogs do what dogs do. So they're trying to figure this out, and then they put together a series of tests, land and water series, that challenge the dogs. Now, understand, different from a master test, even a master national, once the Grand starts, not one mark's changed. Not one blind's changed. Not one anything's changed. The buckets are bolted to the ground with stakes. All the holding blinds are, staked down. All the wingers are on pallets. I mean, they take it to a whole nother level of trying to make it consistent for the first guys. They do dog $9.99, and they do a great job of keeping it consistent all the way through. What's unfortunate about a lot of that is that what dog 1 runs in cover, dog $9.99, there's no cover. The scent that dog $9.99 has to run through is completely different than dog 1. I mean, there's so many factors that go into this thing that make it completely different from dog to dog. So you have to have a very well-rounded dog all the way around. This dog has to be able to sit on the trailer for 5 days in a row and not, get stir crazy. The dog has to be able to handle all types of marks, all types of blinds. As I talk to people about the Grand, they're like, well, what makes it so different? The control's a lot different. There's always a good landmark or two in every series, but there's also really good water blinds. And I think water blinds are what usually, I think statistically, you could probably go through and figure out the water blinds are what take out the majority of the dogs. And so you only got 2 water blinds you got to run, but you better be good at both of them. And and there's no room for error at the Grand. And the other thing at the Grand, so on the weekend test, I've been told very few times to put my dog on the bird. I have been, and usually by people that have judged the Grand or want to be Grand judges. But when you get to a Grand, they're going to tell you real quick, if that dog doesn't go directly to the area of the fall, establish a hunt, they're going to tell you to put that dog on the bird. And at that point in time, you're already at a pair of 1s, no matter what happens from that point forward, unless you do something else wrong, and then you're going to be at a 0. So the deal is the standard is just so high on marking. It's so high on control to and from the bucket. It's so high at the line. It's so high on the honor bucket, and definitely on marking. And we spend so much of our time on marking because you're talking about you have 12 marks at the Grand, and so there's 12 things there that we need to concentrate on. And, we did 5 marks today and 3 blinds today. And so, marking is definitely of the most importance to me.
So, what people don't understand either is what the Grand, they're like beavers, right? So, you go to a finish test and they may try to hide a holding blind here and there, do that sort of thing. And they do what they can. But at the Grand, they take it to a whole different level. Like when I say the guns are hidden, they're hidden. If there's a flat, featureless field, and so that, they'll hide the holding blinds, they'll brush the holding blinds in, but there won't be 3 holding blinds. There'll be 5. They'll have 5 little brush piles out there, or they'll throw some limbs and some trees in the way. And I'm going to tell you, they're do everything in their power to make that dog run around something, through something, throw it off the line. And unless somebody has really seen they can throw a 200-yard mark at the Grand. And unless you've seen a 175, 200-yard mark come out of a completely hidden winger against a tree line, you might as well be running an open, because that mark is a monster mark. So go back to Chris's point, that dog has got to be sitting really well at the line. It's got to look down your gun barrel, because if it moves its head left or right for a split second, it may not see that mark. And I'm going to tell you, the Grand used to be a lot about pencil whipping and yada yada yada, and it's lightened up quite a bit on that. Now the level, and I think Chris will agree with me, the level of test is getting so difficult right now that when you get a Grand Hairy Retriever champion, you've earned it. And you're not going to see a lot of the marks. You're not going to see all the marks. There's no way you're going to see all the marks. Very few dogs see all 12 marks. So those big birds are tough, and then a lot of times you'll go on a maybe a big old long go bird, and you got to come down and get you a 40-yard check down bird, and now you got to call your client and say, hey, your dog went out on a 40-yard mark. You're like, what? They do a really good job of going long, short, short, long, and that sort of thing. And those marks can be big. So if you're preparing for it, you're going to see some big stuff that's hard to see. And I don't think the Grand does it on purpose that you can't see them. I just think, we run in the South a lot, and there's a lot of trees, and they try to get it as visible as possible. But at those distances, it's really hard to see because they do a great job of hiding everything.
For those of us, I've never been to a Grand. I have very little understanding of it. I'm new to the whole game. So for people like me, can one of you guys just explain, like there's a 0-1-2 system. What do you have to do to pass it? At what point are you out? Just a real brief, like how the scoring works. And
I'll explain for just a second. I'll explain this for just a second here, and Chris will jump in here. But the scoring system is 0, 1s, and 2s. 0, if you get a 0 at any point, you're out. A score of 1 is marginal, and a score of 2 is solid, I believe they call it, or passing or whatever. So you can only get a 1 and a 1 one time. So if you're heeling to the line and you have bad line manners, and that each judge gives you a 1, that's your 1-on-1. Maybe it's creepy. Maybe you handle on a mark. Maybe you had a rough blind. Maybe heeling from the working dog to the honor dog. Maybe heeling from the honor dog out. If you get a 1-on-1 at any point in time, you're out. You only get 1. Excuse me. You only get 1. That's your 1 bobble, and that's it. And so
for the whole week,
you
get 1-1 for the whole week.
The whole week. If you handle on 2 marks and you're out of the area, you're out. You have 1 bad blind, and you have another. And let's say you have one series, you have a marginal blind. They give you a 1-on-1. The next series, your dog creep out. They give you 1-on-1 on control, but you pound the marks and line the blind, you're out. So the margin of error is very small. And what the Grand, kind of what it does is nobody's told me this, but we in 20 some years of running, we all figure it out. When you come out of that holding blind, you're on a 2. You have a 2. So what they're doing is when you're running the Grand, they're looking for any bobble that you have. Right? They're looking for technically, quote unquote, bad work because you started on a 2. You can't go from a 1-on-1 and make up ground. Once you lose that point, you're done. So if you give them anything at all to judge, they're going to judge it.
Absolutely. The thing about it is that if there's people out there that have an eye for blinds, and that's their thing as a trainer or as a dog owner. And there's people out there that are very strong on marking or maybe line manners. There's certain things that they look for. And so if you've got a dog that's kind of animated at the line and you're that person that's never owned a dog that's animated at the line, they all sit there like a statue, you find that kind of a negative trait. So you may give that dog, you may say that dog's excessive at the line. They may call it creeping. They may call it whatever. So then you lose a point right there on the first bird out. I mean, that dog may not have moved 8-10 inches out, in front of you. On the blinds, your blinds may need to be very tight, very, very, very small corridor. That may be their thing. And if you run it a little bit wide, Then all of a sudden they'll tell you, well, that wasn't really what I was looking for. I'm going to give you a pair of ones. They give a pair of ones, and you not even know it. You feel like you did pretty good. So a lot of it has to do with their perspective and what happens all the time. And so the deal is
that happens all the time.
What's amazing, here's what's always amazing me about this. We talked about the setup dogs, that we talked about, them figuring out these marks and figuring out where the blind needs to be, that, where it's really influenced by the marks. And then they put together, they have honors and they have diversions and all this stuff. But what's always amazing, because nothing, like I said a minute ago, nothing can be changed once we start running. Nothing, not one thing can be changed to make the degree of difficulty harder or easier, okay? But at the end of every grand, if you look back through history, it was always in the teen percentiles that passed, okay? And at the end of it, it was always like 15, 16, 17%. And that's back in the days when there wasn't a title called a Hall of Fame title, okay? And so they were always in the teen percentile. Now they've come out with a Hall of Fame deal where if you get 4 grand passing 1,000 points, you're bumped in the Hall of Fame. So now there's a lot more grand champions running. And, of course, they've already proved they could do it before, but now they're out there getting a third or a fourth and, all this. And Chris and I have got dogs with even way more than that. But those dogs are continually running. And with that being said, they're in a 21, 22 percentile now of pass rate. But I think it's not because they're passing more dogs. It's because the quality of the dog that's there is unbelievable. And with the training techniques today, the training equipment today, the nutrition and health care that there is out there today, and if I didn't mention the breedings that we have out there today, all that is built and designed for you to pass the grand. Really, at the end of the day, it's what it's done. And so they're having a harder time challenging these dogs and keeping their stats the same. So the tests have gotten much, much harder. If you ran a water blind today, like they ran this last one we just ran, they had a water blind in there that was a really good water blind. If they'd have ran that 20 years ago, there'd have been a lynching. It just would have been unheard of. And so, but it all comes from what I said. The Banded Water Series where they had 3 Mickey Mouse marks. You walked up there, true story, you could have hand thrown all 3 watermarks, hand thrown from your hip. They were bang, bang, bang right there. I think I handled 3 or 4 dogs. All of them were grand champions on one of those little small marks. But they had a water blind even in training would have been fun. And it ate dogs up one right after the other. And the marks were a huge influence on the blinds. Where the blind was placed from where one of the marks was thrown from, and them getting that scent off that, everything was influenced on that blind. It took a really compliant dog and a dog that was really working with you and a very well trained dog.
I'm going to tell you, Chris. Let me jump in here a second. We ran a lot of grands together, and that water blind, was it Banded? I can't remember what series it was.
It was Banded.
What test it was, but that water blind, Banded, that water blind might have been the hardest water blind we've ever ran at a national event, besides an SRS. That water blind was a beast. If it wasn't the hardest one, it was in top 2 or 3. And he's right. That blind was. It'd have been a hell of a qualifying blind.
What was so hard about it?
With a collar on.
What made it so hard?
The placement,
visibility,
the placement of the marks. The placement of the marks were very tight. It was on the point, off the point. The way the wind was blowing coming off of the thrower. We had 100 ducks back there, and the scent coming off of it, and it was very tight quarters. If the dog got out of whack at all, he got out of sight. If he was too far to the left, he went out of sight. Too far to the right, he went out of sight. It's kind of a keyhole deal. But it was just a really good water blind. It took a good handler. It took a great dog. It was being very compliant on that day. I lost 2 grand champions in that test. I lost Hoss and I lost Jenny. And those were 2 as good of dogs as I'd ever want to pet. Hoss had I think he had a couple plates or a plate and 3 grand passes in a row. Jenny has 2 plates and a grand champion, or maybe a 3-time grand champion. I mean, these dogs are really good, and I lost them due to lack of compliancy on the blind. And it just took, these dogs were proven. These dogs were solid. These are some of the best dogs you'd ever want to pet. And they just got up there that day. It just wasn't their day to get along. It wasn't that day to be good for me. But there was a lot of good dog work there, and it was fun to watch the ones that did it. It was, I would say statistically that thing probably got 50 or 60% of our flight. And I know the flight before that was the same way. And I understand now, Elliot, this is the same water blind that only half the people that ran the Grand ran. Yeah. And so that being said, I'm not saying that the water blinds they ran on their series were not that tough, but I'd be willing to bet you that they weren't. And I bet the stats would prove it, not just me running my mouth. But it's that water blind was just very unforgiving. So you had that was definitely not a weekend. If you ran that water blind this Saturday at a finish test, you would have 3 to 4 dogs pass the entire flight of finish, and those were dogs that were going to the Grand or already been to the Grand several times, or maybe had Grand titles. You're not going to get your, I passed the finish 7, 8, 9, 10 times and go up there and do it with your average, weekend warrior type guy and get through a blind like that. There's going to be very few times that ever happens.
Oh, it was tough. Let's talk about, do you handle differently at the Grand, as opposed to like a weekend finish test or a match? Do you as a handler handle differently, at the Grand? What do you do to?
This episode is brought to you by Dave, a banking app that's leveling the financial playing field. Because when you download Dave, you could get up to $500 in 5 minutes or less. No credit check, no late fees. It's part of Dave's Extra Cash account. Advance the money you need with no interest and then settle up later. Download Dave today at dave.com/Spotify. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Eligibility criteria and instant transfer fees apply. Banking services provided by Evolve, member FDIC.
This episode is brought to you by Columbia Sportswear. It's snowing again, and that wind chill is killer. But you're not worried about that because you shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection. It's warmth perfected with tiny gold dots that reflect your body heat inside and protect you from the cold outside. No snow or chilly temps can stop you now. Go out anyway. Shop the Omni Heat Infinity Collection now at Columbia.com/infinity.
I think I take a lot more time, and I think on a weekend finish test, I can handle on 1 mark out of 6. At the Grand, I can handle on 1 mark out of 12, and that's if all my blinds are good. So at the weekend finish test, the stress level is not that great. If I don't pass it, I'll be honest with you, I can run another one tomorrow and next weekend and the weekend after that and the weekend after that. The Grands in the spring and the fall, I think the level of dog that we're running at the Grand, I think they're all just need a good week and a little bit of luck, and I try to ensure I help them with the most luck that I can. I think there's a lot more riding on the Grand. I mean, obviously the entry fees now are about $500 a pop. The expenses for the Grand are, usually that much or if not more. I think, last time they were even more than that for my dogs. It's a very expensive game. So, the weekend or Grand, I think most people that are sending their dog with a pro, their dogs are going to end up paying $1,000 to $1,200, $1,300 to run at one event. On a weekend test, they're going to be charged, the entry fee is about $100 and the expenses are about $100. You got about $200 invested. So yeah, I think there's a little bit more riding on it. And then on top of that, my experience with the Grand is if a dog goes the first time and the dog does pretty well, gets 3 or 4 series deep, as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, whatever, that owner's a lot more apt to continue playing the game than they are if they go out in the first series and, they don't get to do it anymore. So we want every dog to do as best we can. Even if we don't pass, we want to make a good showing with all our dogs, and we want them to all, showcase that, not just to the people there, because let's face it, Jobman's not going to send me a dog in for training. I'm not going to send him one. So we're really showcasing it to the owner himself and showing him that his investment. We gave that dog the right training. We gave him, a good return on his money, and we're explaining to him that this dog is worthy to play this game. And, not every dog is going to pass. There's a saying, I was trying to think how it's said, but it's basically that the Grand's not hard to pass, but it's extremely easy to fail. And even if you have 20% of the dogs pass, which is a pretty good number in today's world, and you think, well, 20%, that sounds pretty good. Well, realize that means that 80% failed. 80% failed. So when Chris and I carry, let's just say, for instance, we carry 20 dogs, let's just say to the Grand, 20 dogs, and I tell you that 4 of them are going to pass out of 20, well, that's not very good. Well, that's the same freaking numbers that they're going to pass. So it's just it's a tough game, and and obviously they have Chris and I are always in the same flight, and we request to do that because we stay together when we're traveling, and it just makes things a lot easier, and we kind of convoy and make sure all our equipment and trucks and trailers and everything goes well, and it just helps mentally and physically, really, more than anything, but because of our group and because of the caliber dog that we have, you take Rhett's dogs, Eric's dogs, Chris's dogs, my dogs, we're usually 70-80% of the flight. Well, there's a little bit of a standard being set there, and we like to think our dogs are set up there pretty high, and most of the dogs that we're running, these dogs a lot of them are grand champions, a lot of them are multiple grand champions. A lot of them are, have national plates. A lot of them are qualified all age. I mean, they're pretty good dogs. And so I don't know that when we get there to the flight, because every dog runs out there and gets them, we get one dog with a bobble. He looks really bad, although it's really not that bad. He just doesn't look like the others. Be kind of like a high school player playing on a college team. He's probably going to stand out as not as good or not. He's a great high school player. He's just not a college player yet. So it's really going to shine on the field just like it does at the hunt test, if you know what I'm saying, or just like it does at the Grand. And I guess that's the easiest way to put it. They're just going to – the standards just get set pretty dead gum high. If I was a guy with 1 or 2 dogs, I would request not to be put in our flight.
I actually agree with that. I request not to be in our flight every year, and for some reason we're always together. But and I do this, and I do the same thing. At the Grand, first time Grand handler, a guy that's been there a couple of times, you're going to be super nervous. There's no way around it, and your nerves are going to start when they do the briefing in the morning and the test dog, and you're going to hear Grand control 35 times in this little speech, and you're going to want to vomit. I guarantee it. But, the biggest thing when you get there is keep your nerves under control. Take your time. I see too many people, they don't take their time aligning their dog up. You're at a finish test, a lot of times maybe you don't need to line your dog up just right because your dog's so good it just goes over and gets it, whether it's lined up bad or not. But if you're at the Grand, you better take your time lining that dog up and making sure it knows where it's going, whether it's a 30-yard mark or 175-yard mark. Because I'm going to tell you, it is a game of inches. And when I say that, people are like, oh, come on. I'm telling you, it is a game of inches. And if you don't take your time to line that dog up to where you want to go, you're going to be in trouble. And the same way on the blind, line the dog up where you need to go and handle slow and steady. And if you think you're slow, you're probably not slow enough. I mean, especially when it starts to get bad. If it ever starts to get bad when you're handling your dog at the Grand, just slow down, because the faster you get, the worse it is. And it's just slow down. But it's a nerve-wracking deal for sure. So, Chris, when you're going to the Grand and you're preparing your dogs for the Grand, the whole 9 yards, what if there's a couple people out there you want to work on a couple things on your mark, let's talk about marking first. What are you going to work on specifically at the ground? I know you and I do the exact same thing, but what do we work on specifically for marking? Like long, short, short, long, big swing left, big swing right. What are we working on that?
My favorite thing to do is a double, and my favorite double is to throw a short left, long right, big swings, to teach the dog to follow from left to right, and then the right opposite going right to left. So we'll throw 2 marks, one say to third base and one say to right field, and then the dogs will go out, pick up right field, come back and get third base, and then do the right opposite. We'll throw one out there at left field and then throw one at first base. We try to stagger our distances where they're not the same. First and third would be the same distance. We try to stagger them. Same thing on right and left field. We want to stagger everything, inside 200. We want to stagger them anywhere from 30 yards to 200 yards. And we want to make sure that dog is very proficient at turning left to right, right to left. And that's my favorite training concept. And the good news is if you have exposed holding blinds in the field, it'll cause some suction on the short birds to go to the long birds. We make sure we throw, out of both sides of the wingers, where we're throwing one out to the right, we throw the one out to the left. Just everything we can do to expose that dog to as many different concepts and marking, using the terrain, using the cover, and using the wind so that we're prepared when we get there. But I think that's my favorite everyday marking setups that we do, because let's face it, you got 2 memory birds, you got 2 go birds, and they're all influenced by cover and terrain, and then on top of that you got the differences in depths, and with all the suction due to being 4 marks, so you don't go back to old falls and all that. So huge, my favorite marking concept. That's my favorite one I like to do. And then of course we will accent them with blinds. Today we actually threw 5 marks, had a single, 2 doubles. We even ran some dogs as a quint, but we may even pull off, run the blinds, and come back and run the marks, and all conglomerated in there together, in a first to third base manner, and a lot of distance differences. We probably had, my short bird today was probably 40, my long bird was probably 180, 190.
We always, and we always try to do, I know when we try to do is we try to make maybe one throw an angle back, one throw a flat throw straight out, and one throw an angle in. Because you're going to have every throw. You're going to see every throw. So don't just throw them straight out, and don't just throw them angle back. You're going to see every throw at the Grand. You're going to have your angle ins and your angle backs. So what we like to do on that, if we're running a double, let's just say we're swinging from left field to first base, right? So on that, let's throw that first base mark. Let's angle that in. Let's just throw that. Let's say, hey, we're angling that in right to left, angle in. Just kind of not straight at us, but an angle in. But then make your go bird in left field an angle back, right? So they've drove past the winger hide and they've angled back to get that bird, right? So now they've drove past the winger hide, they've angled back to get that bird. Now you're coming in and you're using your cues. Like I use a no hand send on a short bird with an easy command and a real light send. And now we're trying to communicate to that dog that, hey, we're going to do an angle in. I don't want you to drive past a gun, and vice versa. So you have to work on your, long bird. You come down in, you check down to an angle in, and then maybe you make the one that's at third base and right field. Maybe you make the one in right field a big old flat throw. So now you got to get away from that gun and you got to hunt out that gun. And maybe your short bird is an angle back. Make sure you're doing all your angles for that depth perception. And they've got to, and when you do that, I think what happens is, and I think Chris will agree, is not every dog is going to go out and pin those birds, right? So if they miss the short angle in bird and they overrun it, we're trying to honestly teach the dog, hey, you've overran it. You didn't find one that's angled back. Now you're trying to teach that dog to work itself in towards you, because it's easy to make a dog run long. To get a dog to miss a mark and work back towards a line to find it is hard. And I'll tell you, in my career, I'll bet you I've handled on the short check down bird over 50%. Honestly, because our dogs can go long. And Chris is probably the same way because we train a lot. Like them little short check down birds, they scare me to death.
Absolutely, that's the bird. Well, and there's no more fun than calling your guy that owns a 3-time grand champion and telling me he handled on a 25-yard mark in the second and a 40-yard mark in the fourth. And I had a dog I had to do that on this last grand, and that is embarrassing. But because the dog drilled every other mark, no matter what the distance, and then just overran these 2 short marks. And understand now, like we were talking about a minute ago on the cover, if I run dog number 2, that cover is thick all the way out there. And if every dog's been overrunning a mark for 100 dogs like they normally do, where dogs do what dogs do, they just start overrunning stuff. Well, then every dog overruns it. Well, then the dog that comes in behind them sees this trail on the cover, overruns the bird, and just keeps running right up the trail. And so it's almost like another level of suction for the dog, and another level of confusion for the dog, which could cause you to handle, and which is what you don't want to do. So there's so many factors to the Grand that are incredible. It takes such a great dog, and my full respect to a dog that has a Grand title, because they are truly the best the breed has to offer for a hunter and a hunting dog and or hunt test dog. So they're the best of the best for sure.
What percentage of guys at the Grand are amateur? I assume it's really, really low.
It is low, and I don't know what that number is. Yeah. But understand, in today's world, I think there's a lot of amateur dogs at the Grand. I don't know what that stat would be. I'm sitting here trying to think if we had any amateur dog. We don't have any amateur dogs we're running this time, but every now and then we will. I know Chris has had several through the years too. But the deal is that with the travel expenses the way they are, the vacation time it takes to run the Grand, fuel costs, hotel costs. I mean, if an amateur puts old Fido in the back of his truck and takes off to Georgia, he's fixing to drop in about $3,000. In expenses, not to mention the entry fee. So now he's at $3,500. He can send that same dog with Chris or I, and maybe have a better handler with that dog and do it for $1,000. Or $1,250 or whatever. And so the deal is that I think there's a lot more of that than what we really know about. There's amateur trained dogs run by pros, and then there's I would say less than 10% of the people at the Grand are amateurs. But I strictly do believe it has to do with vacation time and expenses more than it does amateurs having great dogs. There's a lot of amateurs that have great dogs, and they spend a ton of time with them.
I think There's a pile. I mean, and the biggest thing is the amateurs is don't be discouraged to run this thing. If you got a great dog, sign up, get on the line, and take that aim and do it. I think it's a great learning deal, but I think a key ingredient to an amateur or pros is to get a training group, because our training group is big. We had 90 dogs in our training group for the Master National. I mean, it was humongous.
Yeah.
Now and everybody's like, hey, and our training group for the Grand is 60 plus, right? So we have 3/4 of the flight in our training group. And what people don't understand, like, well, you can't get anything done that way. Listen, you're not there to fix your dog or build your dog or make your dog better in 5 days. You're there to get your dog in a hunt test type environment with all the holding. We said, when we run a setup, It looks like the Grand. We have canopy up right behind the line with people sitting in chairs. We have multiple holding blinds where people walk to get to the line. We have the line. We have all the wingers and holding blinds in the field. We throw. It looks like the Grand, right? So you're not there to run your dog 20 times, 3 setups a day. You're there as an amateur or pro to learn. For one, like you sit at the line, and we don't have people out in the field throwing. Like we don't, in our training group, we run off of wingers or we bring helpers. And everybody in our training group gets to sit behind the line and watch and learn and talk, especially if, we get some amateurs in the group. But it's invaluable to put your dog in the truck, make it sit there for 6, 7, 8 hours, finally get off, get into and work your way through the holding blind, walk up to the line, and that is invaluable because you can get a line correction and work on all that because you're not there. Let's face it, you're not there to run your dog in 3 different setups. So I think finding a good training group with knowledgeable pros that are successful at running these things is invaluable to the amateur, 100%. So Chris, let's talk about, we talked about the marks. One of the marking setups I like to do, and I've done this a lot, everybody's like, hey, how many triples do you run? I run very few true triples. I'm talking very few, very few, very few. I like to run a delayed triple is what I like to run. And what that is, if you don't know what that is, it's when you throw a double, basically. You throw a double, and you go get the second bird. And then you come down and you sit back down, you blow your duck call, you throw out a single, and then you go get that single. And then you come back and you pick up the first bird of the double. And it's not really a true triple, but you have one memory mark in there. So it really helps on the head swinging and that sort of thing. I very, very, very rarely do I run a true triple. And when I do my delayed triples, I like to throw, let's just say today we're going to work on the long, like today, that's what we did. We ran a delayed triple today. And yesterday we worked on a check down bird. So today I wanted to work on a big old long punch bird. So we threw out the punch bird first. The first mark out was at probably 180 out of a winger hidden in trees. So the first mark out was at 180. And I turned to the right, and that was at, let's just say 12 o'clock. And I turned to the right, and that mark came out at about 2 o'clock, and it was only about 80 yards. So I picked that up. And then I sat back down, and I called, and then I had another mark come out at about 50 yards, but it was pushing towards the line to the long bird. And we picked, and that let's just say that landed at like at 11 o'clock, right? So then then when they brought those two back, I lined up and we sent off for the big old long punch bird right up the gut. And so that's today. I ran the delayed triple working on the long punch bird, and yesterday I ran a delayed triple working on an angle in check down bird. So we're trying to do that. We do that a lot. We run a lot of singles, don't get me wrong. Or even in our double-double setups, guys, let's just say we set up a double-double, and let's say your dog's a head swinger, and you've ran too many multiples, and they're a head swinger. Well, you don't have to run the double-double, and I'll do this a lot. Let's just say the first double, I throw them as singles. I throw one as a single. I throw the next one as a single. And then I'll run the second. If the dog is not head swinging a bunch, I'll run the second as a double. You just got to do what your dog, work on your dog. So we do that a lot. But I think a training group, working on your marking and all that. Chris, let's talk about the blinds at a Grand. The Grand, to me, the blind is 150 yards. That's the max on a blind. And I've noticed at the Grand over the last bazillion years is it's pretty, most of the time you can get the first 80% of the blind ran pretty decent. I think a lot of Grand blinds are hard to finish. That last 20 yards is the mother of the whole thing. What do you think?
Well, there again, they go in there and start running these setup dogs, and they figure out where those dogs naturally want to go. And if they do, that's not where the blind's going to be. So they're going to find those areas that are influenced by the terrain or by the cover or by the marks. and they're going to figure out where that dog doesn't want to be, and that's where that blind's going to go. Very, very well thought. I've always respected the Grand setup committee, and because they prove themselves when they have the same exact percentage rate pass every Grand within 3 or 4 points. And that just tells you how good they are at setting it up to challenge these dogs, even with all the improvements that's been made in the dog world with the training and the breeding and the equipment and the knowledge. And so, but all of that, I don't, not to toot their horn too much, because when you go out there and run, a half a dozen or 7 or 8 dogs and you figure out what they're doing. And I've always had a saying, I say dogs do what dogs do. And when they figure out what those dogs are doing, they can make their plans according on how to challenge our dogs at the Grand level. And, and here's the deal. We're not trying to run the blind and just pick up the bird like we do when we're hunting. We have to run it in a very fashionable manner. It has to be very respected. If you go to a weekend finish test and you watch that dog one whistle that blind or line the blind or 2 whistling, it's all real just effortlessly, kind of like when a guy hits a golf ball at, 300 yards straight to the pin. I mean, that's exactly what that's the very dog you have to have at the Grand, and we're not talking about they lucked up and did that once upon a time. When we have dogs in training that we're considering to run the Grand, those are dogs that are, of course, normally HRCHs. They're dogs that are running masters and having a lot of success with high pass ratios in masters, but that are very compliant and don't lose their mind, just because they're out of the house, you know what I mean, or off the grounds or whatever you want to call it. But dogs that can stay together and the guy that can, the guy that can keep his mind together is the one that's going to win. And that's the same way with the dogs. And you have to be very, very non-excitable, and back in the day when I first started running the Grand, these dogs were very piggish compared to what they are today. Those dogs were very good at the line. They puttered out there and got the birds and puttered back and everything. But now the type of marks that they have, you have to have a lot more physical dog to do it. So you almost need that high octane dog, but you also have to have the total control. And so now, we're looking at the Corvette that's good to drive to Sunday church, and the Corvette that's good to carry the family out in. I mean, it's a hard vehicle to put together, if you will, and you need a vehicle that can tow 15,000 pounds and run 120 mile an hour. And, that's a hard vehicle to put together in today's world. And that's what they're looking for. But we're there again. Hey, we're looking for the best of the best. I don't ever wish them to change the standard. I don't ever wish them to make it easier. I don't ever wish the pass ratio to go up from what it is. I like it to be tough. I like it to be challenging. We can gripe and moan and groan about everything. Every Grand's the hardest one we ever been to when we're there. But at the end of the day, if you say Grand Champion, you have our full attention. And it's a very nice dog.
Well, I'm going to tell you, and yeah, when you're training for the blinds at the Grand, put the end of the blind where the dog does not want to go. And just because the blind's 150 yards, don't run a 150-yard blind. If your property allows you to run a 200-yard blind, run a 200-yard blind and put it where the dog does not want to go. Because if it can handle it 200, it'll handle 150, 130. But yeah, Chris is 100% right. We all pass those dogs that are kind of a little bit slower, a little more methodical. But the Grand really is starting to set itself up towards kind of more of a horsepower. You need to have the horsepower to do it. And we talk about these dogs that are, animated to line, those sort of things. We've got a saying in our group: if one comes to the line or, bouncing around, and we always say, no happy. No happy. We always say no happy. And because, you're too happy, you're too high, you missed marks. But, and the Grand is very, very attainable to a lot of people. And Chris is 100% right. When you get a when you put your Grand Hunting Retriever Champion, GRHRCH, on your dog, that is an animal that gets our attention. Nothing against the Master National. I love the event. I like the M&H title. I get it. But when you put a Grand Hunting Retriever Champion on your dog, that is the creme de la creme. That is the best animal around. I'm telling you, they are unbelievable. But Elliot, as an amateur, you got a flash puppy. Chris, he owns a flash puppy. That's super nice. But as an amateur, getting ready to run finish, or maybe the Grand someday, what do you have anything out there that we're missing for our listeners that because Chris and I will just ramble and bamble and we won't even make any sense. But do you have anything out there that we should hit on, how to prepare, what you see, that we're missing on this deal?
I think you guys have done a pretty good job of it. I would just say maybe hit one more time on, if you're just a finished guy and your dog has done well, it's got its finished title, you've never been to a Grand, you don't know much about it, so you're going in without expectations. Take that finished dog. What is the number one or couple things that you need to do to fine-tune that dog to maximize its chance to pass the Grand?
Let me, Jobman, let me take this to start with. I think the thing is that I think we're looking at this a little different. A lot of people think when they leave training they got their HRCH, now they got to start training for the Grand. I think completely different. I think we start training for the Grand when they're 6 months old. I think that our standard on our obedience, I think our standard on our steadying, I think our standard on the whistle, I think our standard on the cast, our standard on marking, everything is built from the very beginning, for the Grand. So, when you build your house, you're building that house on a foundation and on a footing for the size house you have, not for something much smaller. And I think that's what you've got to do. You've got to build that foundation for something a lot bigger than what your expectations are. Because let me tell you something, dogs don't know when you're training them what you're training for. The standard is set by you. If your dog's a field trial dog, if your dog's a hunt test dog, if your dog's a hunting dog, we all need to sandbag and train over what they're capable of from the very beginning, because they will rise to your expectations. I'll guarantee you. They will rise to the degree of difficulty. That they're that good. The breedings are that good. They're that intelligent. We take dogs. It's amazing to watch these dogs grow so fast, so quick, mature into wonderful animals in such a short amount of time. Whether it be for the Grand or for, Masters or Quals or whatever it is, if you challenge those dogs and know that your standard is way up here and that's all you're going to do, even if you're just going to use down here, train for up here. It doesn't take any more time. It doesn't take any more energy to speak of. And then when you do get to the Grand, you're not swapping from, okay, now I've got a finished title. Now I want to go get a Grand title. That if you've done that, you've probably waited too long. You probably have. I don't know of anybody that ever played Little League that didn't want to play school ball. I don't know anybody that played school ball didn't want to play, college ball. I don't know anybody that played college ball didn't want to play in the minors or even the majors. I think they all had those thoughts in the back of their mind. And so I think you need to, is you get this dog and you're having fun with it and you're making some success with it. Hey, go ahead and put that standard way up there and train that way. And you will be amazed what those dogs will give you in return. And, in the Grand level, I'm just telling you, it's not that the marks are bigger or they're longer or they're tighter or they're none of that really. It's just, you want those dogs to be better at their obedience, snappier on their obedience, consistent with their obedience. You want the dogs to stop on the whistle on command and always demand your cast. And and try to have as clean of marks as you can, and really educate the dog on how to get to the bird and stay in the area and hunt. And, all that, but you start all that even when you're running started. I think that's the deal. And there's very few times that you can take a dog that's a wild, heathen, out of control dog in season or finished and make a grand dog out of it. We've all done it, but it's a pain in the butt. So keep your standard good and high from the very beginning, and they'll give it to you in return, I guarantee you.
Yeah, and to allude on that, when we talk to our clients, and if one comes to me and said, "Hey, I want a Grand Hunter Retriever champion," I'm like, "Heck yeah, let's do it." Now, when people are running up through the hunt test program and they're coming and they're starting their dogs on the test, now keep the goal in mind. And everybody's like, when we run and started, when we run a season, when we run and finished. Like, calm down, everybody. That's not the goal. That's not the goal. So keep the goal. We're not trying to build your dog for an HR. You said a grand dog. And Chris is right. That starts when they're young. That starts when they're babies. And the mentality of the trainer training that dog is a little bit different too, right? The mentality of the trainer training a Grand Hunter Retriever champion as to oppose your gun dog, that's a different. You're asking this young, nice grand dog to hold to a different standard its entire life, because what happens to a lot of amateurs and or young small pros is they've got their HRCH, and they're like, we're going to the grand now. And what they do a lot of times is overtrain, and they try to cram it all in there in 1 month or 2 weeks, and they try to cram it in there, and that poor dog just mentally melts down. Where if you would have been basically programming that dog to rise to that standard or hold that standard its entire life, now you're not. It won't have the mental breakdown that it's going to have when you said, okay, now we're going to go have a grand dog. That you've, like Chris said, you've missed the boat. You've missed the boat. Now there are some dogs that have done that. Don't get me wrong. And Chris and I have both taken amateur trained HRCHs and made them grand dogs. But I'm going to tell you that you can't get them dogs usually in a month and go do that. Those dogs you need to have for months and months, because I'm going to tell you, if the first month of their life with us mentally isn't a whole lot of fun, because we're fixing sloppy sit whistles, we're running bigger marks, tighter stuff, we're expecting more of that dog. And a lot of times, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times that'll get way worse before it gets better, because you're almost mentally rebuilding that dog to a different level. But anything else, Chris, Elliot, you guys think about the grand? I know we're kind of rambling on here.
I would say that the grand deal is that if anybody wants to run the grand, I think they need to do it. I just understand that it's not your weekend finish test. It's not supposed to be your weekend finish test. And when you go to those tests, think of yourself like a scout, and you're watching those dogs and you're trying to figure out what dogs that you would want at the grand from what you've been told. And you're looking at dogs that have good obedience. You're looking at dogs that are very good markers. You're looking at dogs that are very proficient on their blinds. So, I think it's way easier to build something once you know what one looks like. Well, right? If it's a birdhouse or a duck blind or whatever it is you're going to build, it's way easier to know what one looks like. So when you're there at those weekend finish tests that you're going to be at, I mean, you need to understand that if you get to looking through the premium there and you figure out, hey, we've got Jed here, we've got Flash here, we've got Isla here, whatever. Those dogs that have done a ton and passed a lot of stuff, you'll see what those dogs look like running. And look, you may even watch those dogs handle on a mark, but understand that you just watch an oddity, but you understand when they walk up there and you see those dogs walk up their line, sit right down, know their job on all three marks, know their job on the blind, know how to honor, and know how to walk offline. That's what you're trying to build one to look like, and come run the grand. The grand's a lot of fun. Our training group, we have a lot of different personality types in there. We have a lot of different people from all over the country. Eric's from up in Missouri, Rhett's down in South Carolina. We're all about as different as you could get. Chris and I are probably the closest in personality group, and the rest of them are completely different, but we have a blast together. We really look forward to spending that time together and training together. The training, we got a dear friend, Rhett Riddle, that trains with us. His style of training is 100% different than mine and Chris's. His favorite saying is, "It's only a problem if you make it a problem." Uh, I couldn't get the
100%.
dogs out of, very far the way he does it, and he kicks our butt all the time. He does a great job with the dogs. He has a very high success ratio, especially at the national. He's got tons of dogs that's won derbies and quals. I mean, he is a very, very outstanding dog trainer. Yet he does it completely different than what we do, and with a completely different style. It's amazing for us to watch that. His staff is a lot different than ours. He just everything about what he does is completely different than what we do, and it's amazing to watch. I got to say, a long time ago that dog training reminds me of coming to Jonesboro. A lot of people come into Jonesboro. They come in on 555, and a lot of people come in on Highway 18. A lot of people come in on Highway 1. A lot of people come in on 49. But at the end of the day, they all get to the same place. And dog training can be like that. We all have different training techniques. We all have different training styles, but at the end of the day, we can all end up in the same place. So pick a great method, for dog training. There's a lot of them out there, right at your fingertips today. And, man, it's so fun to watch those dogs grow and progress and know that you help build that, and Chris and I like building things no matter what it is, whether we're building ponds or we're building dogs or duck blinds or duck habitat or, places to hunt. We like building things. And so we enjoy the dogs because we're builders, we just enjoy a project, and we enjoy seeing that something that we did made an impact on something's life. And so it's a great time. We've been able to make a good living at it. And we've had a lot of great times together because of the dogs. We've been from one end of this country to the other because of them. It is a community, and it is a extended family, if you will, and it's something that I think anybody would enjoy. If you're like-minded, like to kill ducks and mess with dogs, you'll fit right in.
And that's 100% absolutely right. And we're gonna wrap this up here pretty soon. And because we could talk all night on this deal, and I know Chris probably has to go to the bathroom. He sat here for about an hour, so that's a long time for him. But one thing that I'd like to touch on just a little tiny bit is we've had quite a few amateurs that have trained with us over the years, and we take a ton of pride in our amateurs in our group passing their dogs. And if you would see it at the Grand, there's only a handful of amateurs usually in our flight, and they're usually training with us because we have most of the flight. And when we're there, when their dogs are running, and if we don't have a dog in the holding line, we all go up to the line, we watch, and we all cheer them on, we all give them advice. Our training group is a family, and it is. I'll tell you what, I could do the training group and give up the Grand in a heartbeat because that training group is a ball. But if anybody out there listening, I think, go find you a really good training group, find somebody that knows what they're doing, and just go for it, And I think this is a good place to stop. Elliot, don't you?
Yeah,
I could go on for a long time on this deal.
Right. I think that it's been great. I think you guys have done a great job. And before Chris signs us off, I just want to remind you guys, catch our Facebook group, the Flatlander Kennels Podcast with Chris Jobman, and come join us over there and get in on all the conversation that is going on. And also, Chris Akin, where can people find you? I know you've got some DVDs out. Do you have anything that you want to promote a little bit?
Man, just about everybody reaches out to us through Facebook and Web-Footed Kennels, WBBFOOTED, Web-Footed Kennels. Everybody reaches out and on it, and it's got our phone numbers listed. And, man, people can holler at us. We're real good about answering the phone and answering text. And so just reach out anytime. We'll be glad to help you any way we can.
All right, everybody. You've heard it from the man right there, the man, the myth, the legend, Chris Akin. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for episode 4 Chris and I answer a bunch of questions here. So everybody, thank you for joining us. See you at the line. Take dead aim.